Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, May 29th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the January 6th Commission failing in the United States Senate and how this is reassessing and now calling on Democrats to reevaluate their position on abolishing the filibuster in the United States Senate. Now, before we get into this, I do want to say that yesterday I did not produce either of my two videos. I was at graduation and it was in the morning, and I decided that, since I was going to be with family, that I didn't want to create any videos that day. I was originally going to put one out later that evening about this video topic, but I decided to just hold off until today, and yeah, so pretty much I just didn't want to upload a video, so that's my main reasoning behind it. It was graduation day, and I just took a small break from the channel itself. But here I am back. And also, I've seen a number of you guys telling me that you think I should take a break from elections, or you think that it's something that I can do if I choose to. The thing is, when I make these videos, I actually enjoy them. So this is something that I don't really view as work or something that I need to do out of necessity or just out of the promise that I said I would do 2 videos a day. This is something I genuinely enjoy. And while there isn't much political news to cover, things do happen on Capitol Hill every single day. And that's really what I try to expose you guys to. So I do understand it. Yes, I do try to take a break sometimes, but generally speaking, this is not a chore for me, not something that I really don't want to do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. So let's get into this video. Let's talk about what happened on this Senate vote and why it actually failed despite it actually passing, technically speaking, by 19 votes in the United States Senate. So looking at the way that the senators supported or did not support the Capitol Riot Commission, essentially it came down to 6 Republicans crossing over and every Democrat voting in the favor. Now, if you're wondering why it's at 54, I believe that Patty Murray, a senator from the state of Washington, was not in the United States Senate due to family issues. And then Kyrsten Sinema's office didn't tell us why she was not voting in this January 6th commission. It's quite interesting and quite fitting that she, out of all the other Democrats, was one of the few, or one of the 2 actually, that did not vote and did not actually give us an answer immediately, or still to, at this point, an answer about why she did not choose to vote for this January 6th commission. But it says here that her office says that she will make an entry into the congressional record saying that she would have voted for it in that position. So the number, I'm sure, would technically rise to 55 and then 56 if Murray chooses to do the same. But either way, both of them not being there didn't have a tremendous impact on the outcome of the vote. But that just explains why it's at 54, despite every Democrat and 6 Republicans crossing over. Just there were 2 vacant and then 2 absences. And then 35 opposed it, all Republicans. And then 11 actually decided not to vote. And this is how it looks on our Senate map. And if you're looking at it, you see a lot of blue. Now, blue is essentially my color for those who decided to vote for the commission. I was considering doing green, but I decided that blue more closely aligned with the main party that was backing the January 6th commission. And the thing about this is that this was quite surprising. I was looking at the amount of senators that were apprehensive about voting for this, and I expected maybe just a few more, but I did not think this was going to pass. And I said that in both of my videos. Now, I said that the numbers technically were there, and based off of the 11 that did not vote, the Democrats could have closed and ended the filibuster, but that simply wasn't the case. You need 60 votes to end a filibuster, and Democrats really only got 54. And at that point, that's when it became unreasonable and unrealistic for Democrats to actually have ended the filibuster. But with the 11 that didn't vote, it is quite interesting to see, because this is a Senate vote that ultimately proved that the United States Senate with the filibuster for Democrats doesn't always help. And that's something they've known for quite some time now, but this further exemplifies it, because this would have passed had this been a House vote by 19 votes. 19 votes, 54 in the affirmative, 35 in the opposition. 11 chose not to vote, but despite it passing by 19 votes, technically speaking, you need 60 to end the filibuster. And if you look at where this support came from, it came from Ben Sasse in Nebraska, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, Susan Collins in Maine, Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, Mitt Romney in Utah, Rob Portman in Ohio. Those 6 Republicans said they were in favor of the commission, and every Democrat besides the 2 I mentioned before that did not vote. And if you look at some of the senators that decided not to vote, you have 11. You have Pat Toomey, Richard Shelby, Mike Rounds. Actually, I'm just going to read the last names because we're going to get through it, but I can tell you the first names in the comments if you'd like. But we have, actually, I'll just say it, Jim Risch, Jim Inhofe, Richard Burr, Mike Braun, Roy Blunt, Marsha Blackburn, and then, of course, those 2 Democrats. So 9 of them were Republicans, 2 of which were Democrats. And if we were to see the vote actually rise to 56, you would be looking at just 4 out of those 9 Republicans that decided not to vote to actually cross over to Democratic lines. But it's easier said than done given the overall numbers. But this 19-vote passage seems like, or I'm not going to say passage because it did not pass, this 19 votes difference here makes it seem as if the Democratic Party did have bipartisan support, but that was not the case. They may have had 6 GOP senators, but that's 6 out of 50. You're talking about, 12 out of 100 in total that would have crossed over. So I'm honestly not necessarily impressed by this 6 GOP votes crossing over. This proves that the Senate is still as partisan as it was before, even on a commission that was initially labeled as bipartisan. I mean, when it left the United States House of Representatives, Democrats were moderately hopeful because 35 Republicans crossed over to vote in favor of this, 20% of the House GOP. And if you're looking at the Senate, what the Democratic Party, or sorry, not 20%, 17% of the House GOP. What the Democratic Party would have needed in the United States Senate was 20%, but based off of the vote to either uphold the objection to electoral certification in Pennsylvania and Arizona, the vote in the House where the majority of House Republicans voted to object to the electoral certification, when barely any senators voted to object, there was a very big difference there. And I expected that maybe some of these senators might cross over, but it became very clear as soon as Mitch McConnell came out against it straight from the beginning that this would not be a passing bill. And at the end of the day, while there were 35 crossover votes in the United States House of Representatives, the Democratic Party wasn't as lucky in the Senate, at least proportionally speaking. 6 senators amounts to around 12% of the GOP in the United States Senate. 35 amounts to 16-17%. So Democrats weren't as lucky in the United States Senate. And if you're wondering, how this filibuster could have actually been ended, well, it actually is quite easy. When the Democratic Party won control of the Senate in 2020, they essentially were able to control the rules following through. What happened under Harry Reid, the majority leader for the Democrats, they changed the Senate rules in terms of the Supreme Court nominations, in which the Republican Party used against the Democrats for 3 nominations. The nominations set forth by President Trump completely rewrote the Supreme Court of the United States. When you have Amy Coney Barrett, when you have Brett Kavanaugh, when you have other, justices that potentially could have been nominated and were nominated not only on the national level, I mentioned the 2 most, well-known, but essentially looking at our nominations from President Trump, what he put forth in the court, the precedent set by Democrats and the changing of the rules ended up backfiring. And that's why some Democrats are more apprehensive about what might happen if the filibuster is abolished. But the point being, the Democrats have the opportunity to change the rules and abolish the filibuster. But it would prevent the Democrats in the future from preventing major GOP bills, just like the GOP is doing to Democrats right now. But I think that this failure, after a vote where we see 19 more senators say they support it than oppose it, and yet it still can't go through, it might question whether or not some of these Democrats are willing to take that risk. But there are 2 in particular that are saying time and time again that they will not get rid of the filibuster. That's Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. They said that they will oppose any effort to do away from the filibuster. And some of them, I believe Joe Manchin has said, changing the rules seems to be off the table at this point. Before, he was open to it, but now it seems as if the filibuster is here to stay, which puts more weight on 2022 and questions other Democrats that seem to be a little bit on the edge. When you have some of these other senators that are saying that they are going to likely follow with the National Party, or are you waiting to see? They probably support ending the filibuster, but don't want to come out with that position because it seems to be a radical one. And I can understand, for example, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, but not necessarily Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona. And I'll explain why. Looking at the 2020 election results, you might say, I understand why maybe a Democrat from a very Republican state might be opposed to abolishing the filibuster out of saving their own reelection bid. And that's where I see the understanding come from Joe Manchin. But if you also look at the 2020 results and you see the fact that Arizona elected a second Democratic senator, flipped to Joe Biden, maintained the Democratic majority in the state in the House of Representatives. So if you're looking at 2018 and you're looking at the same exact election results with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, you see, yes, Joe Manchin is performing well in a red state, and Kyrsten Sinema was the start of Arizona getting bluer. And I think that her election victory itself should have been a statement to her that Arizona is getting more and more Democratic. Kyrsten Sinema did not win by a fluke. Arizona went to the Democrats in 2018 for a reason. It went to Democrats in 2020 for a reason. It'll likely go to Democrats in 2022 and 2024 for a reason. The demographics changing in the state, more specifically in Maricopa County, even more specifically in the city of Phoenix, that's what's driving the state towards the left. So Kyrsten Sinema comes from a state where there are 2 Democratic senators, the majority of the representatives are Democrats, and Joe Biden just won the state in the 2020 election. Yet she's playing it just as safe or just as conservative as Joe Manchin, who comes from a much more conservative state. So Arizona doesn't really make sense to me. It's not as if she's in a state where she needs to be voting this way or needs to be taking such strong positions in opposition with the mainstream Democratic Party. Because if you're looking at the election results in West Virginia versus the state of Arizona, you will see exactly why I understand Joe Manchin, but I don't necessarily understand Kyrsten Sinema. Donald Trump won 69% of the vote in West Virginia in 2020. Joe Biden received 30%. In Arizona, contrary to the state of West Virginia, Joe Biden won the state with 49.4% of the vote to Donald Trump's 49.1% of the vote. Joe Biden won the state of Arizona and received 49% of the vote. He received high 20s in the state of West Virginia. So looking at the 2018 results, I really can't justify why Arizona and West Virginia, should even be on the same level. If anyone was to be in firm opposition to abolishing the filibuster, it would be Jon Tester. But Jon Tester actually has recently spoken on it. As this article suggests, more pressure has grown on Biden and Democrats to end the filibuster. And Jon Tester acknowledges, this filibuster, saying, we've got to figure out whether leadership on both sides wants to have obstruction or if they want to come together and try to get things done. And also says before, he was leaning against voting, leaning against the abolishment of the filibuster, but seems to be coming around slightly. Some of these statements that he's putting out sort of question and bring up this idea of whether or not progress can actually occur with the filibuster in place. The only time Democrats have been able to do something major is through reconciliation, not necessarily through an actual vote, because America and the Senate, consequently, is very polarized and can't seem to agree on anything, including a bipartisan effort to investigate the Capitol insurrection, the first attack on the Capitol in 200 years. So instead of trying to convince some of these Democrats, I think what Democrats are going to try to do, and by these Democrats I mean Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, is to get to 48 votes in favor of abolishing the filibuster. Why 48? Well, I'll show you. The upcoming 2022 Senate elections might prove to be positive for Democrats, despite the year largely expected to work against them. And I think that will largely come from the United States House of Representatives. But as of right now, Democrats have the House and Senate majority. They can lose the House majority, but in order to abolish the filibuster, the House doesn't matter. And for Democrats to be at 50 currently, the 2022 map is probably the most favorable map I've seen out of the 3 for the 2022 midterm elections in specific. Right now, at this point, if the Democrats were to have a red wave year, if it was the 2018 map, they would be blown out of the water. It was the 2020 map, probably the same thing. The 2022 map offers more opportunities for pickups for Democrats. And the reason why I say 48 is because Democrats can retain all of the states they have currently, and I think that is something that absolutely could happen in 2022, and add on Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And if that was to occur, that would bring the Democrats to 52 to 48. Not that large, it's certainly not 60, but what it does is allow two of the candidates in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, the major Democratic candidate in the state, seems to be leading right now, but we have to wait on whether or not Connor Lamb is going to announce. But, it'll likely be a competitive primary between both of those two. But John Fetterman has already come out against the filibuster. And it depends on what that Wisconsin Democrat supports. But at the end of the day, these are going to be two Democrats that are likely going to be more inclined to vote against the filibuster or vote to abolish it than Joe Manchin, who comes from a much more conservative state than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And if Fetterman is that Democratic nominee and ends up in the United States Senate, all it's going to take is the convincing of a newly elected Democratic senator in the state of Wisconsin, which I honestly think wouldn't be too hard to do. So Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, two states where Democrats can win in 2022, brings the Senate vote against the filibuster in this hypothetical reality to 50-50. And you know who gets to break that tie? Vice President Kamala Harris. So while Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema could vote against it, if this is the map, 52-48 at the end of 2022, that will allow the Democratic Party to essentially strip Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema of their power, of their ability to prevent the Democratic Party from abolishing the filibuster, to prevent the Democratic Party from taking major standpoints, from doing many, many things. And if the Democrats were to use budget reconciliation again, they wouldn't need to get Sinema or Manchin on board. These two Democrats could counteract both of the opposition votes from both of their Senate offices. But at the end of the day, what this does is essentially strip both of them of their power and brings up this question of whether or not the filibuster is here to stay or needs to go. So the 2022 midterms, are going to be impacted, I think, by the Democratic Party funneling a lot of effort into the Senate elections, largely because they know they can expand their Senate majority and also strip Manchin and Sinema of this leverage. Rather than allow them to control the Democratic Party in the Senate single-handedly, while 48 other Democratic senators sit idly by, 50 Democratic senators will sit idly by, while two try to make a lot of commotion and end up can't doing much, largely because Democrats will have that majority through the vice president. And this Senate vote on the commission, I think, further reinstills that the Republican Party is here to prevent Democrats from having major pieces of legislation, even if it seems to be bipartisan. Because of how polarized we are, Republicans refuse to have Democrats in any type of upper end position or have any type of victory, especially in a scenario such as the Senate, where they have free reign with something such as the filibuster that Democrats simply can't close. Everything seems to be indicating that the filibuster might be under reconsideration from Democrats, but Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema likely aren't budging. But this vote, this 19, in the advancement more than in the opposition, still failing in the United States Senate, might bring up this question for some of these other senators and might make them more outspoken about abolishing the filibuster. This Capitol Riot Commission isn't here. It's not going to happen. But I will say that it does inspire a new lesson and a new idea in Democrats, actually not necessarily a new idea, but a reoccurring idea that just shows just how prominent it actually is after such a poor performance in what would otherwise be a very strong one. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2022 midterm election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.